Real quick, before I get into more complicated examples, I think it might be beneficial for us to go over some properties of negative powers, because we're going to see them a lot when we're simplifying. So negative powers, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, I'm taking an expression and I have some negative exponent to it. I don't want that. I don't want negative. So what am I going to do to get rid of negative exponents? Well, I can get an example first. I can do something like a to the negative second. Okay. Basically, we've seen negative notation in exponents before when we've talked about inverses, something like that, but I don't think this is necessarily related to that. This more so corresponds to what is the difference between this and a squared. You can kind of think of them as inverses, yes, but I think it's visually easier to think about them this way. So basically, this is the same thing as a squared, but you need to change its location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that this is divided by 1. And if I have a negative power, I'm going to sort of swap these places. Okay. When I do that, the 1's going to be on top, but instead of having a negative power, I'm going to have a positive power. So that's the general format, is negative power, move it to the other side. If a negative is down here, you'll want to move it up. Okay, so let's do some examples of that. Real quick, some very simple ones. Let's say I've got 1 over a to the negative second. This corresponds to, I'm going to take this expression that has the negative exponent, bring it to the other side. Okay, so this ends up being a squared on top times 1, which is just a squared. Because there's nothing on the bottom, there's an implied 1 on the bottom. This is my expression. More complicated example real quick, because we might see it up on our assessment. Let's say I have something like a to the negative third over b to the negative second. Both of these are negative on the top and bottom, so I'm going to swap the places of both of them. Instead of a being on the top, it's going to be on the bottom now, and I'm going to change its power to positive. Same thing with b. Instead of it being on the bottom, it's going to be on the top now with a positive power. So that is sort of how we deal with negative exponents. I'm going to go through one more example where 1 doesn't move, but 1 does. Let's say I have a to the negative third. I'm dividing by b squared. Well, we notice that the only one that's negative is a, right? So this is the only one that I need to move to the other side. B stays on the bottom. Since nothing's on top, there's an implied 1. On the bottom, I'm going to change a's power to positive now, and I'm multiplying by b squared because b didn't change its location. So that's in general how we would deal with negative powers.